Welcome back. I'm Jeff Byers, Annie 150, and we are working on Module 2 and Part 3 of the low poly food can and texturing. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, I noticed that we've got some issues from the other video or in between the videos that I need to address. So the idea here is if I hit the 4 key, we have our high poly underneath and our low poly is on top. That's fantastic. That works. But what I've noticed is even though I've got it aligned on top perfectly, the problem that we're going to have and that we're going to see is that this is too far below the line. Okay, what do I mean by that? Let me go to this side view. And there's a physical depth that when you're baking maps just won't reach. It won't go through a surface and try to find this detail. This detail has to be at the surface. So how do I do that? Well, I basically have to extrude the top. And what I mean is that it just won't shoot rays far enough down to see the high resolution through this mesh. Okay? So what it has to do then, it has to calculate, and it won't calculate it correctly because it's just too deep. So remember that when you're modeling stuff, that physical, if you were to take and just physically push down on something, like a piece of clay, put your finger into it, that the low poly on top and that part that's pushed down too far, you actually have to model that with the low poly, not as a high poly, but you still have to model that in. So I have to model that ridge in to get it close to the ridges down here, and I'll show you what I mean. Alright, so let's go ahead and hit the 5 key again. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and turn off the high poly. Everything else is working, I think. Okay. And if we wanted to, we could go and add some detail here and still have a pretty low poly object. I think we're just trying to go too low poly and it's causing some issues. So what I'm going to do is, as a reference for the high poly, I'm going to just kind of have it there, but I'm going to reference it so I can't select it accidentally. And what I want to do is I want to select all these on top. Okay. So I'm going to use the brush tool, and I can hold the B key down. Hold the B as in Bob down as I move my have my left mouse button held down and I'm moving back and forth. Okay, so the B key, and you're moving your mouse back and forth. You can change the scale of the brush. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint the top. It's much easier than selecting one at a time. You're going to notice that works out pretty good, and I can hit the excuse me, the F key, and I can rotate around. Now notice that sometimes if you rotate kind of strangely around an object, that you have to be careful that you don't run into issues where the pivot point's off. So you have to hit the F key, and then you can zoom out a little bit, and that'll rotate around the center again. Alright, so I'm going to click off, and we're going to do the same thing with the bottom. Again, go ahead and do a Control E. And this time I'm not going to use the manipulator. You can use the scale to do this as well if you want to. If the manipulator is not working, I can scale that in just a little bit. Now I'm going to go to the top view, and I'm going to hit the 4 key so I can see where I need to be with this. Okay? So you can see I'm going to scale that in a little bit more. And you can see that really thick area right there. Okay, I want to be about at least as thick as that. Okay, there we go. Okay, and then the side, and then we'll do this same thing on this side like that. Alright. So you can see how that's working. You just cannot eyeball it and get it very, very close. And that's going to be the thickness of the wall. And then I'm going to do Control E again, and I'm going to hit the W key, and I'm going to move that down until I just touch these. Okay, now I'm going to have to experiment. You kind of have to experiment to see if this is going to work. Okay, So I'm just going to touch those. Now a lot of people say you got to go that far down. I don't think you have to go that far down. Let's go about right about there. Okay. And then we're going to do one more extrude. There we go. And hit the R key and just kind of scale that in. Okay. Like so. Alright. Perfect. And click off. Alright, so that works out pretty good. I think that little piece right here, I think this will still work okay. You know, if we see a problem, we might have to come back and add that detail. Okay, right here. Let's go back into face mode and see if I can select that. I'm going to hit the 4 key. You can see that it's not quite going all the way through. Another thing is, I noticed that the outside edges, okay, are working, meaning that our the corners right here are following the outside, but I think this part here we need to move that or scale that up a little bit higher. So let me show you what I mean. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to go ahead and scale this, okay, and I'm going to be very careful. I'm going to get kind of to the side here like this. I'm going to scale this with the red and scale it out to where it just touches the outside right here, okay, and then I'm going to go down and I'm going to use the blue and just scale it just so it touches the outside. So you can see how I did that, and you can see it just touches the outside around. I think that's going to give us a better bake too as well. It's persnickety when you're baking maps. It's very picky about how you bake. So I'm going to go back down here, hit the 5 key again, and we're going to do the same thing down here as well. So I'm going to go in here and go to face mode and select those faces. There we go. Alright, perfect. Hit the 4 key, make sure I didn't select anything else, right? And hit the 5 key again. There we go. And we're just going to go up here like this, and we're going to follow the same thing we did on top. So I'm going to do Control E, okay, right? And I'm going to go to the top view, all right? I'm going to hit the R key, and I'll do the same thing as I did before, where I'm going to go ahead and scale that in, okay, until it meets the other one. Okay, so we're just kind of doing what we did before, like that. Scale it in. Doesn't have to be perfect. Again, just eyeball it. Alright. And that didn't really work the way I wanted to, so let's go back. And what I'm going to do is, like I did before, I'm just going to use the non-uniform this way. There we go. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to use the non-uniform like I did on top. Get that one perfect, and I'm going to move it down a little bit and then move this one in. There you go. See, you can see it moving. There we go. So now when we go to the bottom, it looks like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Control E again and then hit the W key and just move it up. Okay? Again, until I just touch those little rings there. Okay? And that's good. Okay, alright, so we're just touching the rings on top, we're just touching the rings on the bottom, and that looks pretty good. Okay? Alright. That might be a little bit too high, so let's bring that down a little bit, just so it's touching. There we go. And we're very, very close. Okay, so I think that'll work. Yep, yeah, it is going through a little bit. There we go. Okay, so that works really well. Notice that I didn't check my extrusion, right? Look at that. Look at that. That's caused a serious problem. So I have to be super careful when I extrude. I don't select anything else. So I'm going to have to do that again. Here we go. And let's go ahead and select that again. And let's make sure that extrude didn't go through. Okay, we're good. So I'm going to go ahead and go Control E. There we go. and hit the R key and go to the top view. Again, I want to make sure I'm not selecting anything by accident up here, and that keeps getting extruded. That keeps getting, I don't know why, that keeps getting selected. Let me go back. There we go. All right, let's try this again. Go to face mode, and a lot of times it remembers what you selected before, so I'm going to marquee select it. You have to really be careful with that. Marquee select the whole thing, click off of it, and then try again. And then we're going to go into the selection mode again. Let's see if we can get that. And I'm going to make sure, hit the 4 key and just kind of zoom out and make sure nothing else is highlighted except for that little piece there. That can trip you up and you don't notice it, so just double check everything. And you can see it caught me, so it'll catch you too. So be very careful. So I'm going to do Control E again, hit the R key, go to the top one more time, and scale that in a little bit. There we go. There you go. Awesome. And then we got that pulled in. Let's do an extrude again. Control E and then W. Move that up. Hit the W key. Move it just so it touches the top. So it goes through just a little bit. There we go, like that. Very close. Cool. And double check it. And if you need to go more, you can just go select them again and move them down, but I think we're good. We're good to go. Let's see how it bakes out, and we can always come back in here and tweak it out if we need to. Cool. Alright, let's see how it bakes and see if everything works. Alright, so the thing is, let's go ahead and unreference the high poly over here under the layers editor and select them both. Okay, and we need to be in object mode up here under the main menu bar. Click on this guy right here and make sure you select, and then I want you to select both of them. Okay, and this one needs to be unreferenced, and select both of them, and let's do center pivot, delete by type history, and freeze transformations. That'll clear everything out. Alright, and since we've done so much work on the low poly, we need to duplicate it again. I'm going to do a Control D, D as in dog, click on a new layer, and we're going to call this low poly try, that means triangulate, and save it. So when you bring an object into Substance Painter, now this isn't always the case, but I find that it's about 90% of the time that you need to triangulate your low poly, but we don't want to use that when we're texturing. So this is just kind of a proxy. We're basically creating it, sending it out to Substance Painter to use, so Substance Painter won't have any errors when it models, or excuse me, when it bakes the maps, and we're texturing. So it's really important that we triangulate that, and we'll go ahead and turn off the low poly so we don't use it. We're going to turn off the high poly, and that leaves us with the triangulated one. You can turn that off and on, make sure it's working. Okay. What I've also found with this is that you notice that I've got edges that are sharp and hard, but then I've got edges that look kind of funky. So what I suggest students do, just to kind of clean that up, is we go to edge mode and we select the whole entire thing, marquee select it, hold your space bar down, just hold it down, okay, and go to mesh display and soften edge, okay, soften edge, right, and then you'll want to go into selection mode and you see that it softened all the edges, okay. Now we don't necessarily need some edges hardened, or excuse me, softened. So if I right click over it and go to edge mode, we want to make sure that this one, okay, if you double click on it, it kind of follows the ring all the way around. Now hit the Q key, double click on this one, it goes all the way in, and double click on that one, and that should go all the way around too as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to flip it over and do the same thing. We're going to double click on that one, and we're going to double click on this one, hold the shift key down, and double click on this one. Okay, and what we want those edges to be sharp. Okay, So I'm going to hold my spacebar down, go to Mesh Display, and go to Harden Edge. Okay, so then it looks like this. Okay, alright, so that looks pretty good. Pretty happy with that. So here's our food can. And it's completely done, and since we added more history, let's go ahead and delete the history. So click on delete the history, and you're good to go. So now we've got everything ready to rock and roll with the low poly try, and we need to make sure that this is the same as the low poly here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that off, turn the low poly on. And notice we don't have that softness in here. So what I'm going to do is it's going to be scary, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this, right? We've got this one here, so I'm going to select that one. I'm going to do Control D with that. Go to low poly, and I'm going to go to add selected objects. So I'm going to turn the low poly off here. So basically what I did was I just duplicated that. Now, one of the things, if I was smart, I realized that whenever you model more into your object, that's going to mess up all your UV maps. Now, I'm not saying all of them. We're going to check it, but there's going to be we extruded that part up here, we extruded that, and then we extruded this. So we've got 1, 2, 3 new things that might cause some issues and problems that we need to fix. Okay, so we need to do that. And before I duplicated it, I probably should have done that. That's what I'm saying. Work smart, not hard. It's not incredibly, horrible, but I'm going to need to delete. Click on the low poly again, make sure that that's visible. Make sure that you have a copy of that before you do this. Don't make a mistake. Okay. So I know these are in 2 separate files and they're 2 separate objects, so I'm just going to click on this one and delete it, and I'm going to work on this guy right here. Now if you know you made a mistake, just go Control Z, okay? And hopefully you set up your settings, so settings, preferences, so you go to Windows settings, preferences. Let's make sure your undo is correct. So let's go in here to undo at the very bottom, okay? You can scroll down there and try to find it too. And make sure your undo is on and it's infinite, okay? It looks like the queue size is at 100. I don't think it'll ever go that high or higher, I don't know. But it's infinite. So it lets you undo as far as you can, as far as you want. Now make sure when you're undoing stuff that you're not undoing stuff that you don't want to undo by mistake, because a lot of people will do Control Z as fast as they can and they went too far. You have to do Shift C to go back, and sometimes it won't let you, so you can get yourself in trouble too that way. So just be careful. Alright, so turn that off, and there's nothing in there right now, so we're going to work on this. And what we're going to do is go to UV Editor, and let's fix the new issues that we've created. Now, it shouldn't have changed anything here, but it would change something here. You can see that nothing's changed, but we've added more geometry here, so we've got to force it to see it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a way to do that. So here's the face, okay? So I'm going to click on one of the faces and double click the other one. It goes all the way around. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead in here and I'm going to go hold down the spacebar and go to UVs. Okay, I can do this up here too. UV and then planar. So go down to planar, click on that, and we're going to do just reset it. And we're going to be in the y-axis. Okay, bounding box and project. You might want to keep image height and width ratio. Okay. It should be okay. And then project. Alright. So that's the top one. And let's take a look here. Close that and open it back up again. Sometimes it gets stuck like I talked about, and there it is. And so there's that new piece, and so what I need you guys to do is hit the R key and then scale it down. And we're going to move it over. Again, we can move it over in here because that's going to be, and we're going to kind of keep it the same size as we have on this. So I'm just going to put it over top, hit the R key, and just scale it up until it matches right there like that. And that is fine. That works out great. So I'm going to put that up here like that. And then we're going to go to the bottom. Okay. So I'm going to move that over here to the other side a minute so I can work. And I'm going to move to the bottom of the can and go ahead and select, hit the Q key and click off anywhere. Just click off. And then click on one of the faces and hold down the shift key and double click on it, and it goes all the way around. Again, just make sure you're not selecting any other faces. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on this one. I'm going to go to a UV and planar. I don't have to go into the option box. Usually you do because I've set everything, and click planar again. And then you can see this pop up again, and I'm going to hit the R key and scale that. Again, this isn't hard work. Okay, and I'm going to move it so it's kind of over top the other one and get it scaled up right. Again, just eyeball it. Don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this. There we go, like that. Okay, cool. And then we got another piece in here that we need to fix and finesse. So I'm going to move that back over here. And the other piece is this one on top. So you can see that we've got this piece on top. Okay. So I'm going to hit the Q key. And I can either hold the shift key down and do one at a time, or I can go ahead and get my brush tool and just select. And I think that's a lot faster. And the top we're just going to leave. We're going to keep them separate. Alright, so I'm going to go in here, and we're on the bottom, and go to UV, and then, of course, planar. Okay, and you can see this is what I've got. Okay, and you can see what's happened here. It's left that one piece all the way around that's not been mapped yet. So I'm going to continue scaling and moving and making sure they're fitting in here just right. Okay. There we go. You can see that's good to go. I'll just move that down here just for a second because I want to keep that open right there. And then we're going to do the bottom. Okay. Like this. That's the top actually. And then click off a couple times and just kind of, let's see, get back on to face mode. See if I can get that. There it is. It's working now. And there we go. Sometimes the brush isn't big enough. Hold the B key, make it a little bit bigger. It has a hard time selecting them. Again, hit the 4 key just to make sure you're not selecting anything else by mistake. It'll turn orange or whatever color that is. And now we're ready to do one more UV planar map. There we go. And we got a couple more to do. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and scale that one, move it over, and you're probably wondering, why don't you just do texel density? I can, but I want to show you how to manually do it too. Alright, so this is the one that I want to go to UV shell. I'm going to click on that UV shell here. Click off, click back on, and there's that UV shell. What is that? That's that part that we extruded down. You see? Here we go. So we could do a number of things. We could do like a cylindrical map to do the inside to flatten it out like that. Okay, let's give it a shot. The thing is it does not have a cut in there, and that will be a problem. Okay. So what I can do is I can do automatic map on that and then connect it back together. I can do that's the easiest way to do it. So UV automatic map it. Okay, you can see I broke it up into small little pieces like that. I can go in here, and then we need to rotate it whichever way. And there we go. And then hit the W key and smooth that up a little bit like that. And I'm just going to move it away from all these just real quick. Whoops, I'm sorry, you can't see what I'm doing. So I selected those. Let me go back, show you what happened. There we go. So that came in like this. I take these and I'm gonna rotate them like that. And let's go ahead, and in here I am going to go ahead and use my toolkit and arrange and layout, and I'm gonna orient those shells so they're perfectly aligned. There we go. And it wants to snap. I hate that. So I'm going to go in here, UV shell, and move them away from each other. And this should be, let's do this really quickly. Okay. And let's go to the ends and let's find out where the edges are. So there's that edge. And I'm going to do this really quickly. Go to cut and move and sew. And find out where that edge is. This edge. Click on that edge and move and sew. Here we go. And then click on this edge. Just click on this edge here. It needs to be rotated. So this kind of rotated around the wrong way. So let's click on that and rotate it. Like that. Okay. And then of course I need to take my toolkit and orient shells. There we go. And select the edge. And now when I select this edge, it will match over here like that. And move and sew. Where are we? There we go. Move and sew. There we go. So there's that. Okay, that's that edge in there. So I'm going to click on this shell. And notice we've got to do a couple things in here. Remember the other one, it was deformed just a little bit. So we're going to go to Unfold and click on Unfold. There we go. And then we're going to go to Orient Shells. Perfect. And then we're going to scale it. Here we go. Alright, so, and I'm going to move that and scale it so it's kind of like the rest of them. Same size, you know, same UV space, texel density, except I'm just eyeballing it. Alright, so, and then we got that done, and I think that's the only thing we had left. Oh, the one on the bottom. Yeah, we didn't do that one either. Let's go ahead and do that. So we got one more to do. Okay, I'm going to minimize that a minute. And you need to go ahead and select those. Okay, or you can go back in here and select them. I even forget sometimes that we can just select that piece right there, and that will highlight it, which is nice. And then we can go in here and do UV automatic mapping. Open that back up again and do the same exact thing. So we're just going to rotate this. Okay, and then we're going to go in here to orient shell. Move that down, and let's see if we can do this with let's see, edge. Select the edge, and as long as this will attach to that one, then you can move and sew. Okay, here we go, and this one is upside down. That won't work. So it's if anything, it's consistently turning that around. And that works okay. You just got to rotate it. And then we'll go back into edge mode and see if that will work. So yeah. So move and sew. And then one last one. Move and sew. There we go. And do the same thing where we're going to shell. Right click over it. And just move it into place and scale it like we have been doing. Like that. So, moral of the story, make sure that you are completely done modeling before you UV texture map. And sometimes you don't know that when baking maps. You have to go back and you realize, ooh, I got to make changes to my model, and that's just the iteration process of modeling and UV mapping and texturing and all that stuff, going back and forth. And now we can load these back in again. And now we're all set, hopefully. We don't have to do any more work when baking maps. And if we do, we have to come back and problem solve them out. So, you know, that's one of the things you learn when you're doing this type of work. So I'm going to pull this off to the side because the window is actually too big and is causing all kinds of problems. Let me see if I can get that scaled and sized back down again. There we go. So we can get them both in there. Okay, so all this is all going to be silver. Yeah, all this is going to be the label. So we're going to go in here and go to selection mode. Alright, so I think we're good with this. So just like we did before, we're going to go ahead and we need to save that out. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, because we got history on here again, I'm going to go and delete the history. Okay, it didn't delete anything here. We're fine there. Another thing you have to be super careful about, I'm going to go ahead and make this bigger, is you cannot have anything, any of these UV shells go outside of that black mark on both sides. You can't. If you do accidentally, you'll have errors in Substance Painter when you're baking your maps. Okay, so make sure you're aware of that. A lot of students email me. I want you to be aware. That's the #1 problem, is that students go over the black lines that are, in each one of these UV tiles. So be careful. And so let's go back to object mode. That's important. We have to be in object mode. You cannot be in component mode. This is component mode. This is object mode. Component, object. Okay. So make sure you are always in object mode when you are saving out your maps. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and save out my map now that I got the history deleted. Click on that little, looks like a camera snapshot, 2040 by 2040. It remembers everything. JPEG. Aspect ratio is good. How many tiles do we have? We have 2 across and 1 up. Browse. Where am I putting it? Right. Okay. So here's my. Looks like I've got a couple in here. So it's the 1 and 2. So what I'm going to do is it's telling me what I had before, and I'm going to overwrite that. You can see that was the old one. That's #1. So what I'm going to do is I called it food can udum _UV. I'm going to get rid of this because I didn't write out U1 V1. So I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to go ahead and save this again. It's going to give me a warning. Probably, do you want to save over top? Apply and close. Yes. Overwrite. Okay, so it overwrit, and what it did was it saved this tile out as UV1 and this tile out as UV2. Okay, so that's good. Let's close that, and let's close that, and let's go in here to File, Save Scene As. Save your scene now because you hopefully are done. Let's go to, I'm going to go to 10 on this one. There we go. Save. All right, cool. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go in, save this out, export it. But the last thing we need to do is let's go ahead and duplicate this. So I'm going to move it to the side and do a Control-Z. I just want to make sure nothing is behind it. Okay, so Control-Z. Okay, there we go. Right, nothing's behind it, so I'm going to duplicate it. So everything's done. Our UVs look good. Just double checking. Yep, got them all done. And then we're going to do Control-D as in David. Control-D. And then we're going to basically click on the low poly that you had before, not this one, the low poly you had before, and add selected objects. So now we've got our low poly back again that we're going to use for texturing. And our high poly try now, we're going to select that. Now if you get confused, okay, the way to start over again is probably to move one of these out. Just like click on one and you can see that there's one underneath. Just move it away from the other one if you get confused, and then put them in their own layers. And you can always type in, if you mess up on this one, you can always type this one in and just type in 0 and it'll go back to the middle. Okay, so if you get confused with duplicating and stuff and you're not sure what layers and what, you can just move one of them off to the side. That's what I would suggest. Okay. Right, if you're not having issues and you can keep track of everything, just go ahead and have them on top of each other. Just remember that before you export anything, you want to do this. You want to select it, just click on it. You do not want to marquee select it. Just click on it and move it. If there's nothing underneath, then you're ready to export it out. Okay, the next thing we need to do is triangulate it, because that's what it says, triangulate, low poly triangulate. So let's go to, hold down the space bar, go to mesh, and then triangulate. And here we go. There it is. Okay, so let's delete by type history again. And let's go ahead and save this out. So now we're ready to save this out finally. And you're probably asking yourself, well, if I triangulate it, does it mess up my UVs? Let's take a look. No, it does not. So triangulating an object does not change your UVs, okay, at all. Doesn't scale them, doesn't change them. And if it does, there is a corruption issue. Okay, so you can see with mine, nothing's changed. All right, so let's close that. All right, let's click off again. Go into object mode. Make sure it's an object. It's going to turn green. Okay, we've deleted by type history. Okay, and now we're ready to export it out. So, File, Export Selection. All right, there is some confusion on export all and export selection. Export all, let me explain this. Export all exports everything in your scene. That means your animations, your camera, your lights, anything, any other objects in your scene, even if they're in layers and they're not even on, they're not visible, it will actually save everything. Okay. Well, when you do an export selection, it just exports what you have selected at that moment. Okay, so this is what I have selected at that moment, and I'm going to go click export selection and export. We want an OBJ export. Okay, so make sure that you're seeing that. If you don't see that, even if you scroll up and down, then you might have to do this. You might have to go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager. And you're going to need to make sure you auto load and load everything. Okay, and a lot of it is just apply to all, auto load. Okay, and just scroll down a little bit until you get to the next section, do auto load, and then make sure they're all auto loaded, and then refresh. Okay, and then close. And now you're ready. So now you should be able to see it. So File, Export Selection, and then find OBJ. There you go, Export Selection. And now we're ready to rock. And I've done this a couple times, so I'm just gonna call it food underscore can underscore low underscore poly. Now you have to have underscores. You can't have spaces. That would be considered a syntax error, and that's a code error. That would be a real problem with Maya reading again. So if you ever run into a problem where Maya doesn't open your scene up, it's because you have a space or you have some crazy syntax error. So only use letters and numbers, nothing else. Okay, don't do like an exclamation point, or don't put in a dollar sign or a percentage sign. All those are syntax errors, and Maya doesn't understand it. And spaces, you can't like have a space between words. You have to do an underscore. Okay, right? So a lot of times when I say underscore, you don't have to do that. You can just do like, if I wanted to, I could just get rid of the underscores. Whoops, don't want to do that one. Get rid of the underscores like this, and go that route if I want to. Okay, right, and that'll work. All right, so anyway, I do underscores. Export selection, and yeah, I'm going to replace it. All right, so we're good with that one. Let's go ahead and turn that low poly try off. Now the low poly we have here, this is what we're going to texture when we come back to Maya. We're never going to use this again. Hopefully not. So the high poly, that's next. So the high poly, you need to delete by type history, and if you haven't frozen transformations, do that. But right now, select it, and let's get moving. And export selection. Click on that. You should have export OBJ, and then you go into the high poly. Make sure that's a high poly. Name it that way, and make sure it's OBJ, and then export it. Okay. All right, perfect. And we're done with this particular video. So this is part 3, and we'll move on to part 4 when we get into Substance Painter. All right, make sure you watch the Substance Painter pre Introduction to Substance Painter, because I'm not going to go over every single function. And they do a great job. Flip Normals, I subscribe. They're a great little YouTube channel. It's called Flip Normals. And so check them out. Anyway, watch the Introduction to Substance Painter, and they take you through all the basics of Substance Painter, and it's pretty overwhelming. But watch the video, and then what I'll do is when you watch my videos, things will start clicking, and we're only going to do certain things, and not, instead of showing the whole entire thing in one shot, because you usually will pick up on some stuff and not all. So anyway, I want you to watch that video. If you haven't watched it, go back up to Introduction to Substance Painter and watch that video for me before you do this one, the next one. So next video, I'll see you in part 4.